Flight of the Navigator is one of those movies that should be seen by more people, which makes this an underrated movie. The movie takes place in 1978. David goes to the woods to fetch his brother when he suddenly falls down a ravine, and when he wakes up, he's 8 years into the future. This part of the movie is where you get so invested into what's going to happen next. You see David's house has different people living there now, and you're just like, what's happening? How did David travel through time? When David sees his parents, he sees that they're older and he's just confused and shocked. Even when he sees his brother, who is now older than him, it's just weird. The way this is paced is so perfect. We are feeling the same emotions as David. We're confused and we're very curious on what will happen next. We also see the spaceship, which David communicates to until he reaches inside. NASA retrieves the spaceship and finds out David's mind printed out a drawing of the same design, so they want to run tests on him. It's always funny watching the scene because at this point David and his family are going to go back to live a normal life. They're obviously convinced to let them find out what has happened to David and why he hasn't aged, but wouldn't his family want to know that immediately and find out the same exact thing? It's just funny thinking about it. So when David gets to the facility, he meets a girl named Carolyn McAdams. They talk about how stuff has changed since he was gone and become friends. Now, in the beginning of the movie, we see David likes a girl named Jennifer. His brother teases him about it, and his dad sees David watching her through a telescope. That's when his dad talks to him about talking to girls. After that, it's never brought up again. I feel in the original draft of this movie, Carolyn was supposed to be Jennifer, now being an intern at NASA. It makes perfect sense to have it be the same girl. Now David can finally talk to her and she will remember him. Wouldn't that be interesting to see David being 12 and Jennifer being 20 and we see how they would talk to each other, knowing that David likes her but now she's too old for him? We don't know if that was an element to the story, but to me it just feels like it was. It's obvious why this didn't happen. Being Disney, they wanted the story to focus on David flying the spaceship, which is still really good, but you gotta admit, it would have been really cool. So back to the story. We find out David has information and star charts in his brain. When he finds out he's going to be at NASA longer, Carolyn helps him escape and he goes inside the spaceship. For the rest of the movie, it's David as the navigator trying to go back home and making friends with Max. This is where we hear all this cool science talk about other planets and we see other alien creatures. So it's cool to know that this movie kind of set up a new planet. They mentioned Phalon and there's other alien creatures out there. This part of the movie really does bring every kid's imagination to life about flying in a spaceship, going through space and underwater and going really fast. That is what makes this spaceship so fascinating, how it's made up of strong material, it can change shapes, and the best part, travel through time. The reason why David went through time is because Max stored his star charts in his brain and he got lost because he accidentally crashed, so he sent back David to a time period that wasn't really his. So he gets David's star charts, which are stored in his brain, and that's where they form a friendship. Flight of the Navigator is a movie that captures every child's imagination on flying your own spaceship. We all pretended when we were at that age, and this movie turns that into a reality. And I also gotta mention the soundtrack to this movie. I love it. From the opening credits all throughout the movie, you just hear this cool, like, futuristic 80s kind of music, which is really good. That's the stuff I really love about it. I'm glad they didn't put any, like, real music, like, from bands that just played into the movie. The music is so perfect the way it is. It fits perfectly with every scene and every single moment in the movie. I just love it. Now, back in 2009, it was announced that a remake was greenlit and a writer and two producers were attached to it. Then, in 2012, two new writers were hired to rewrite it. Ever since then, there hasn't been any updates on it, and you know what? I'm glad. I honestly hope Disney just abandoned it because Flight of the Navigator is just fine the way it is. We don't need this to be a reboot, remake, messed with, brought back to life. It is perfect the way it is. Just leave it back in the 80s. Just let them find it on their own because all the people that know about this movie and seen it love it, and I know they wouldn't want to see a remake because we've seen a lot of remakes and reboots today and they don't even come out really good. They usually come out either bad or just okay. So I think I speak for everybody when I say just leave Flight of the Navigator alone. It's perfect the way it is, does not need to be messed with, doesn't need anything mentioned, doesn't need to be brought back to life. So just Disney, just leave it alone, abandon it. I hope that happens because I think it's perfect the way it is, and I think you all would agree with me too.